Welcome again, everyone. The semester is quickly wrapping up. Uh, so I just wanted to share another brief video on just reactions and reflections on the discussion board from last week, as well as sharing a little bit about just the career information proposal. I made a video on that and I sent it to you via email and posted it in the announcements on Blackboard. Then I'll share a little bit of just thoughts on some of the articles and on ethical decision making. All right, so nice ideas overall in how to support people with disabilities. I feel like there are a lot of good ideas, drawing from the readings, drawing from other outside resources as well, which was great. A few things that came up is for several of you, and some reached out to me individually, just on the emphasis on person-first language. So at times people might say the disabled, or, basically referring to disabled people. So the emphasis is on that one element of their identity of being disabled is emphasized, and that's almost put first. Obviously, there's much more to the person than that one identity. So people have begun to talk a lot about, the potential benefit and value of saying people with disabilities or a person with a disability, because then the emphasis is on the person first. So it's just something to be thinking about. It might, I don't know if there are reactions to that, but sometimes it might seem like a small thing to someone who isn't in that lived experience, so someone who isn't or doesn't currently have a disability. So it's just something to really be thinking about, that sometimes it can really humanize the person, to say the person with a disability, because sometimes it can be pretty frustrating, or kind of feeling like it kind of invalidates, like someone might believe like, hey, I'm more than my disability. I'm a person outside of my disability. I have, a lot more interests and strengths and, abilities as well. And I think that goes for all social identities, so it's just something to really be thinking about, kind of honoring people as people first. And then obviously not excluding the impact of disability or ethnicity or whatever the social identity is, that is a part of the person, but just something to be thinking about, that power of our words. I think as counselors, our words are often our main interventions, so being thoughtful and considerate of, like, how do our words impact the people who we serve is important to consider. It seems like a lot of you also talked about, emphasizing client strengths, which I think can be really important. So not always just kind of emphasizing the barriers or challenges, but there's natural strengths too for people with disabilities and all clients. And I appreciated that there's also like a level of advocacy that was discussed, and kind of trying to better the experience of people with disabilities from a systemic level, whether that's a school system or a national level, like a legal level. Something important to be considering, as one of the roles of being a counselor is to be an advocate, to kind of support clients through advocacy measures. Okay, those are just a few thoughts that I wanted to share. I guess I already brought up a lot of the career intervention proposal video, thoughts that I published that video already. But just so you're aware, next week, there won't be any articles, no readings for next week. Basically, it's just time for you to work on the career intervention proposal. So this week is going to be the last week of readings, so just kind of keep that in mind as you're preparing and finalizing everything with the career intervention proposal. So next week, no more readings. But next week will be there'll still be a discussion board. It'll be posting the PowerPoint presentation of the career intervention proposal. So kind of like the outline and some of the basic information about your career intervention proposal. And that's discussed in the syllabus online, Blackboard, as well as in the video that I share. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions about that. Okay, I wanted to share a few thoughts for this week's articles. So the Bonifacio article. A lot was brought up in these articles, so I'm not going to be able to touch on, significant portions of it. But on page 520 of the Bonifacio et al. Article, it basically talked about, in the results, it talked about, how does ethnic identity and discrimination, experiences of discrimination, kind of, how does that impact self-efficacy and outcome expectations? So basically it was, kind of seeing what are all the relationships there. So what was noticed was that as ethnic identity levels, or like measurements of that, went up, outcome expectations went down. So the lower the outcome expectations, or the kind of, basically, like, as people explored and became more self-aware of their ethnic identity, their cultural identity from an ethnic lens, they saw more barriers to outcomes, to like, what do I hope that, like, these goals that I have, what do I anticipate the outcomes being? So I guess in the end, I kind of saw it as, in the article, kind of talked about how, like, more barriers are anticipated when people, particularly Latinas, which is the focus of the article, more barriers are anticipated. So that's kind of something difficult to note. On the other side, there's like, as ethnic identity went up, self-efficacy scales went up, though. There's a positive relationship. So there's more of that belief in self, though. So kind of anticipating more barriers for the outcome expectations, but self-efficacy, the belief in self, the capability to be successful, went up as well. So it was kind of interesting finding there. And I'm interested just on what your reactions might be to that, and your reflections. So something to be kind of integrating and thinking about. Let's see here. I'm looking at my notes. So something to be thinking about, I guess, is what is the career counselor's role in supporting clients who are experiencing or have experienced discrimination? So I think, depending on each person, that might look a little bit different. Some ideas could be, so one, actually, Latina female that I was working with several years ago was experiencing discrimination from her mother-in-law. She would talk about just kind of like these kind of demeaning statements that would be made about her based on her, Latina identity. Basically, the mother-in-law not feeling like she was able to live up to the same, I guess, potential as white peers. So it's really frustrating, but it's kind of done in an implicit way, which is often the case with microaggressions. It's kind of like implicit or implied bias, but not really kind of owning up to it directly. So basically, with this client, there's a lot of these just beliefs, and so some of them have kind of been internalized, of like, oh, maybe I can't go into the STEM field. Maybe I'm not smart enough with the math and the science. I think there's gender dynamics there as well. From her family of origin, we kind of got into that as well. So the females don't go into those fields. It's more education, or staying at home, or housework. So she had to kind of, in our work together, a lot of that was just kind of unraveling those beliefs and those biases and those ingrained ways of thinking and being in the world. So one powerful instance, though, so I guess what I'm getting at is, part of my approach was just to really deeply help the clients make sense of that friction that they feel internally, of like, there's these beliefs that have been imposed on me, but I don't like that. So highlighting and bringing to surface what that friction means can be really powerful and important. So what that looked like for this client was, she had a little niece or a cousin, I think. And the cousin was kind of talking about, I think she was young, like 10 or under, talking about how she wanted to like go into a science field or go be like a medical doctor or something like that. And like my client was talking to the niece and just kind of reporting to me that, like, so what she was saying to the niece was like, I really wanted to tell her, like, and this is what I told her, you can do it. You can do whatever you want to do. It might be hard, it might be difficult, but I believe in you. I really believe that you can do this. And so I just kind of paused there for a second, and I said, it really sounds like that was kind of the advice for yourself too. You really wish someone had said that to you. You really wish someone had said, you can do it. I believe in you. You're capable. You can do it. Work hard, and you can, yeah, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be barriers. But so I was basically just reflecting back, saying her exact words back to her, saying, like, it sounds like this is the advice that you want for yourself. And she just melted, just started becoming very tearful and just like, yes, I just wish I had those messages. I wish I had been, had those beliefs about myself, and that's what I really want for her, but I also want it for myself. So that's just one interpersonally based way to respond to discrimination, kind of helping them. In this case, it naturally occurred that what is the advice that the client has for themselves and giving that back to them. It wasn't my advice. I didn't use those words at all. It just was her exact words. So I think that was a really important kind of turning point of helping her kind of believe in herself, because after that, she started to make more actions towards the changes that she wanted to make. So in the end, with this article, the last thing I wanted to highlight is page 521, or the implication section. It talks about the importance of culturally integrated sense of self. And I think perhaps that's a big part of career decision making for a lot of populations. Everyone has a cultural background. Minority populations have barriers based on their minority status, which can sometimes create significant barriers and difficulties. So integrating that cultural experience into their sense of self can highlight self-awareness, it can highlight potential pathways forwards, it can highlight for the counselor ways of advocating. So I think once again, that insight brings the potential interventions and resolutions of some of the challenges and some of those barriers. So as you grow and as you develop, you'll find also more of your beliefs about how to support clients who are experiencing discrimination. So with the Flores and Hepner article, I'm not going to go into it a lot. I think it has some great points in that article. I particularly just wanted to reference pages 187 through 189 of that article. There's italicized statements. I'm actually going to pull it up really quick on my side. So I'm not going to go into all of it, like I said, but the career counseling process, and integrating culture and multicultural competencies into the career counseling process. So there's several, like developing a strong working alliance, and talks about kind of how to do that from a culturally competent, framework or perspective, as well as, maintaining a stance of creative uncertainty, assessing the client's level of racial saliency. So I think this I just wanted to bring that up because I think it can have some relevance for practice. Obviously it's not saying exactly here's what to say, but it's kind of like a big part of counseling is just like, how are we conceptualizing what's going on for the client? How are we making meaning of what the client is experiencing, number one, then kind of what they need, and how can we support them in obtaining what they need? So I feel like those beliefs or those italicized statements can be a big part of that conceptualization of how we can conceptualize supporting clients from a culturally, competent framework. Okay, so where I wanted to end today was switching gears to ethical decision making. So obviously a big part of the discussion board this week is comparing the NCDA, or National Career Development Association Code of Ethics, with either the ACA Code of Ethics or the ASCA Code of Ethics, so the School Counseling Association Code of Ethics. So you don't have to go into every tiny little detail of those and read them word for word, but you might want to just choose maybe one significant section, and kind of compare. So I'm going to go into that a little bit in the written lecture, talk about technology and the NCDA Code of Ethics and some of the updates from the most recent edition of the Code of Ethics. So one thing to consider, so I'm pulling this from the ACA Code of Ethics. It talks about the importance of ethical decision making. So it says, when counselors are faced with an ethical dilemma, they use and document as appropriate an ethical decision-making model that may include, but is not limited to, consultation, so consulting with peers, consideration of relevant ethical standards, so referencing the ACA Code of Ethics and kind of basing ethical decision-making in the Code of Ethics. Looking at the principles from ethical decision-making, look at laws and legal structures, and then generating potential courses of action, et cetera. So this is basically, it's talking about how to go about, now, if you're starting to feel that there may be an ethical dilemma, there may be some sort of friction, how do you go about resolving that? So an optional article, once again, emphasis on optional, was put in this learning module for week 13 as well. So I'm actually going to pull up that. I'm going to share my screen really quick. Where is it? Okay. Sorry, I'll get there soon. Okay, here it is. Okay, so the ethical decision-making model. This was from ACA, so the American Counseling Association. It talks about the kind of some of the core foundational principles of the code of ethics. So like sometimes there's not always exact clarity, even looking at the codes, what to do, but you can always go back and reference the core fundamental principles upon which the ACA code of ethics is based and developed. So autonomy, justice, beneficence, non-maleficence, and fidelity. So those can be really central to making decisions, but then they go into some specifics. So sometimes you need to identify the problem. Like one person might feel that there isn't an issue with something, and another counselor could feel like, yeah, absolutely. So for example, when I was in my internship at the Career Center at Idaho State University, one counselor felt like that, connecting with clients or at the Career Center via social media was not a problem. Others were more concerned about that. So that was just something like, okay, so is there a problem? How to go about knowing that. So I guess in this case, like, is it a problem or is it concerning? Could it be an ethical or a confidentiality issue or whatever the issues are of connecting with clients via social media? In this case, it was via LinkedIn. So it's pretty, I think part of the rationale that the career counselor felt like it was okay is like it was still based in, career development. It was still kind of supporting them in their career development path. Yeah. So then the second step is to apply the code of ethics. So whether that's the National Career Development Association or the ACA code of ethics. And part of why I paused there a second ago is because in this case, sometimes in career counseling work, you might just be working with someone on a resume or cover letter or interviewing prep. So it might not really be getting into the personal side of career. So that could be another consideration of like whether the career development professional feels like, if I were to get into the personal side, would it still be relevant and okay to be connected via LinkedIn? So I think it kind of gets into multiple levels of, it kind of depends on the beliefs. But like every single time where I feel any sort of, maybe there's a problem, I'm not even sure, maybe there could be, going to the codes, going to the relevant codes or multiple codes. So going to the ACA Code of Ethics, reading through the sections on social media, it can be really, really helpful. So actually I have it pulled up here. So here it talks about in H6, all the different areas, at least it's kind of infused in other places as well, but this specifically talks about social media. So it's usually just kind of talking about in cases where counselors wish to maintain a professional and personal presence for social media, that here they recommend that you separate that. You have a professional social media page as well as a personal. So with clients, it'd be much more just on the professional side, personal, other relationships. That you talk about social media in the informed consent process. And yeah, you can respect the privacy. So you're not like basically looking up information unless they're okay with you looking at their social media accounts. So that can be pretty helpful. NCDA actually has even more on social media. I think they went a little more thorough, possibly due to the huge impact of LinkedIn on the professional world. Then you can kind of determine, okay, the natures and dimensions of the dilemma. Looking at the code can then kind of help you kind of examine and clarify what are the core issues going on here and what do I need to be thinking about in order to remain ethical. Then generating potential courses of action. Maybe it's like, okay, one course of action is to get off of social media. One is to, create 2 different accounts. Another is to like, maybe it's okay just to go how things have been going, just generating as many courses of action that you could possibly think about. And then the next step is, obviously kind of analyzing those potential courses of action, figuring out, which one is best, which one do I feel personally good about with my ethics, and morals, and as well as that aligns with the laws and the ethical codes that are relevant to your practice. So then you evaluate even more your selected course of action with those foundational principles, and then you implement the course of action. And throughout this, it's important to be documenting every step of the way. And I'd say maybe even an 8th step is to review, maybe after like 3 months or whatever, it's a certain time period. It might be helpful to not just implement and be done there, but say, okay, now that I've done this for a while, maybe the person chose to stay on social media with clients. So maybe a month down the road or 2 months down the road, reevaluating, seeing if that course of action still is actually beneficial. So yeah, I wanted to go into the ethical decision making because, I think it's a big part of, you will run into ethical dilemmas. That will happen, especially in the world that we live in with technology, with sometimes boundaries can be pretty hard to establish and maintain. So whether it's career counseling, whether it's mental health counseling, school counseling, whatever your setting is that you work in, or multiple settings throughout your career, being firmly grounded and having a clear understanding of the code of ethics. That doesn't mean you have it memorized. It means you just know where to reference, and you go and you do reference when you have any of those points of friction. It can be super helpful in going through those steps when appropriate is really important. I guess I didn't even mention, but a big part of that whole process is you don't do that all on your own. You consult with colleagues, you consult with, supervisors, so that, once again, you're not just on your own going rogue. But yeah, those were just some of the thoughts for this week. I want to cut it at this point, but if you have any questions, whether it's about the assignment, about this week's material, whatever it is, I'd be happy to chat, and I wish you the best.